Buongiorno. Buongiorno, Giovanni.
Buongiorno, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Thank you for accepting my invitation. And
Grazie a te.
thank you very much. And I will start by presenting the subject, the topic of your presentation. And I will present the question of our trainees and my students. That these questions you answered in your presentation here. I will switch to Arabic, if you may. Okay.
Okay.
And I share my screen with you, and you will tell me if it's working. Just a moment, please.
No problem. I do not have to get a train.
So, this one, I hope it's okay. I have too many windows open. That's the problem. This one. But
Okay.
do you
Now
see
is it now the slide is full screen. It's full screen.
Yeah.
Let's back to the first. Well,
Yeah.
okay.
I wanted to register also. But okay, it is registered, but not in Canvas.
I read now there is just a black point here.
Yeah.
Can get it. Can you get it out? Oh.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So I will switch to Arabic if you may. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحرية والصحة والسلام للجميع. اليوم نستضيف معنا الأستاذ جوفاني ماتوتشي، ولنا الشرف في مجموعة حاورني أن نستضيف السيد جوفاني ماتوتشي، وهو وسيط تجاري ومدرب في إيطاليا، يحمل شهادة في القانون وشهادة في الاقتصاد والتجارة من جامعة لا سابينسا إيطاليا في روما. له دبلوم في الاقتصاد من جامعة يورك في المملكة المتحدة، وتدرب عن طريق دورات الدراسات العليا في التقنيات البديلة لتسوية المنازعات وقانون الإفلاس من جامعة سيينا، وهو موظف سابق في بنك متخصص في تقييم وإدارة المخاطر، وخاصة تلك التي لا يمكن إدراكها بشكل مؤكد، وهو وسيط معتمد من وزارة العدل الإيطالية منذ عام 2006، ومدرب منذ عام 2011، وسيط في غرفة التجارة في إيطاليا، ومركز مشترك في هونغ كونغ، ووسيط دولي في كوريا، حريص على استخدام الوساطة لمنع المنازعات في حال حدوث أزمة مالية للشركات، وهو أيضا مستشار في المديونية. وقد كان لي الشرف بأني شاركت في العديد من المحاضرات معه، وهو يقدم لنا موضوع اليوم، موضوع شيق حول تجربة إيطالية حول الوساطة، وهي تجربة فريدة من نوعها لأنها تهم الوساطة الإلزامية. وموضوع المداخلة اليوم يهم الوساطة في المجال المدني والتجاري في إيطاليا من فترة بين 2010 و 2026، ويتحدث حول أهم المسائل. نشكر السيد جوفاني ماتوتشي على قبوله الدعوة ونعطيه الكلمة. You have the floor, Giovanni. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And please, if you may.
Dear Professor Salma, many thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased to be here, and I really hope just to be useful to your students. My name is, as already Professor Salma told, my name is Giovanni Matteucci. I'm a civil and commercial mediator in Italy. Italy, I think this was likely the first country in the Western world just to introduce mandatory mediation in the last 10, 12, 30 years. And the situation has been, still is, rather complicated. Well, just a short survey. Shall we start from a bit of history? From the second slide, please. The Italian state was founded in 1861. The first civil procedure code came into force in 1865, and in the first 7 articles, conciliation was ruled. I repeat, the first civil procedure code, 1865, the first 7 articles was conciliation. Mediation belongs to the Italian legal culture since the 7th century BC. The vision of justice at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, seems was not to be the maximum. According to Giovanni Giolitti, one of the most relevant politicians in that time. In Italy, justice is low, expensive, and without sufficient guarantees. A problem we will find over the decades, as well as other issues. Lack of training for people in charge of handling conciliations, and the unwillingness of praetor magistrates to resort to judicial conciliation, and the hope for reduction in civil litigation through resort to conciliation and arbitration. Italians are not too fond of novelty. Everything must change so that nothing changes, is a statement in a famous book and film called The Leopard, 1958. In Italy there were, and still are, too many lawyers. Read a book by Calamandre, edited in 1921, more than 1 century ago. Italians many times prefer to find the solutions not by formal methods. Presolini, another writer, 1921. Second capital. In 2011, mandatory mediation started its way in Italy. In 2009, there were almost 6 million pending civil litigation cases in the overall judicial system, the highest number ever reached. In 2010, Italy, probably the first country in the contemporary Western area, introduced mandatory civil mediation, a condition of admissibility. In other matters, whose disputes amount to approximately 8.5% of cases in civil courts. The judge could, and still can, order the use of mediation in disputes relating to all available rights. The mediation agreement approved by the President of the Court was enforceable. I'm still speaking of 2010. The regulatory innovation was substantial. A condition of admissibility had been introduced, without which no court action could be brought. The weak point of all these innovations was training. The weak point of all these innovations was training. Mediation is a procedure essentially based on communication techniques. Only 30-hour courses, established at that time in 2010, including communication techniques, were prescribed, mostly managed by lawyers who focused on the structure of the procedure and its relationship to the trial. 3 regulatory acts were approved: Law 69/2009, Legislative Decree 28/2010, and Ministerial Decree 180/2010. The opposition from the lawyers was vehement, arguing first of all that mediation is not part of the Italian legal culture. History says the opposite. But the problem was cultural. Legal training at the university and professional based exclusively on adversarial techniques, and as well economic. ADR understood not as alternative dispute resolution, but as alarming drops in revenues. And on the part of the judiciary, there was a form of benign neglect, as mediation was considered a child of a lesser god. And this was a cultural and educational problem. The Italian legislator also made a fundamental choice: the outsourcing of mediation management to public and private bodies, set up according to criteria dictated by the Minister of Justice and controlled by the latter by the same ministry. Anyway, in 2011, mandatory mediation started its way in Italy. And just from the beginning, troubles, but also remedies. Appeals to the Constitutional Court against the law began to pour in. And the Constitutional Court in 2012 declared unconstitutional part of Legislative Decree 28/2010 for, be careful, excess of delegated power with respect to Law number 69/2009, not for hindering access to justice, not for hindering access to justice, guaranteed by Article 24 of the Constitution. There remain voluntary mediation, which grew, and mediation ordered by judges. Appeals in court increased. Pay attention. In matters where compulsory mediation had been abolished. Appeals in courts increased in matters where compulsory mediation had been abolished. Therefore, it had been useful. The backlog of trials in civil courts was still very high. So in 2013, the government reintroduced the compulsory mediation with Law Decree 69/2013, known as Del Fare, with relevant innovations. To overcome the hostility of the lawyers, compulsory legal assistance to the parties was introduced, and lawyers became mediators ope legis, thanks to the law, with a required 15-hour training. If 50 hours are provided inadequate, let alone 15. Moreover, an initial information meeting was introduced, which was compulsory and free of charge, except for €40 out-of-pocket expenses. At the end of the initial information meeting, the parties, advised by their lawyers, could decide whether to start the procedure, which was then voluntary, or to abandon it. The so-called procedure opt-out. I repeat, an initial information meeting was introduced which was compulsory and free of charge. At the end of the initial information meeting, the parties, advised by their lawyers, could decide whether to start the procedure, which at that time finished to be voluntary and started to be compulsory. Procedure called opt-out. The agreement. This was very important. The agreement signed by the parties and the lawyers, immediate and enforceable, without going to the president of the tribunal. The Article 185 bis of the Civil Procedure Code was introduced, according to which the magistrates could and still can make a conciliatory proposal. If not accepted, they can send the parties to mediation, arb then med. In this way, the traditional decision-making power of the judges was highlighted, expanded its perimeter. The magistrates, by slowly, began to use the tool at their disposal, placing the lawyers faced with the choice of whether to comply or not, in a more or less adequate manner, with the judge's order. The quantitative results were lower than expected. Knowledge of the institute was not widespread, lack of training at the university level, and the quality of the offer was not always adequate. I repeat, the quantitative results were lower than expected. Knowledge of the institute was not widespread. Lack of training at the university level and the quality of the offer was not always adequate. From a statistical point of view, in the period 2011-2022, the following were recorded. Reduction, -5% per year, in procedures activated in civil courts due to the economic crisis and the COVID pandemic. A strong increase, plus 14% per year, in civil and commercial mediation procedures. A strong increase, plus 12% per year, in agreements reached in mediation. And according to the European Union, in 2016, Italy used mediation at a rate 6 times higher than the rest of Europe. But in 2022, the success rate, agreements over mediations activated, was 15%. The ratio agreements over new judicial procedures, 0.9%. Too little. But it should remember whether that the matter subject to mandatory mediation in 2011-22 period amounted to only 8.5% of the dispute subject to civil proceedings. Furthermore, in mediation procedures where all parties had introduced themselves and agreed to go beyond the first meeting, the success rate was 47%. In 2021-2023, the Cartabia reform. The Draghi government remained in office from February 13, 2021 until October 22, 2022. A jurist of considerable competence, Professoressa Marta Cartabia, was appointed Minister of Justice, who radically addressed the reform of the civil process and ADR, civil, criminal, and commercial matters, and also negotiation and arbitration. The Cartabia reform was completed between 2022 and 2023. With regard to mediation, the main innovations were A. An increase in the number of matters subject to compulsory mediation, from 8.5% to 20-25% of all cases in civil courts. Abolition of the opt-out procedure. Mediation became mandatory from the very first meeting. And also negative procedural consequences and tax incentives to increase the effectiveness of the procedure. Increased commission to be paid to mediation bodies. Greater involvement of the judiciary, extremely important. Involvement of the public administration will take time. Higher quality requirements for mediation bodies, mediators, and trainers, and sanctions. I think that, another novelty, regulation of the use of technical and advisors in mediation, telematic mediation, online dispute resolutions, opposition to an injunction, increase in training duration from 50 to 80 hours, still too little, according to my opinion, increase in tax incentives. In my opinion, the most important innovations were those level B, D, and L, abolition of the opt-out procedure, greater involvement of the judiciary, and increase in training. But unfortunately, there is still a lack of curricular university courses on ADR. On June the 30th, 2023, the overall Cartabia reform on mediation definitely came into force. Well, many legislative changes, but unfortunately not still sufficient. And after just over 1 year, new rules were enacted called the correttivo. Legislative Decree number 216 of December 2024, published in the Official Gazette in January 2025, with amendments to Legislative Decree 1022 number 149, the Cartabia reform, and to one of the basic acts of the Italian legislation on mediation, the Legislative Decree 28/2010. The minutes and the conciliation agreement are exempt from registration tax up to the value of 100,000 euro. Until then, there was the exemption was until 50,000 euro. Now, 100,000 euro, just the double. Not theory, but matter. The delegation for participation in the meeting. Unfortunately, all too often, the parties do not attend mediation session and are represented by their lawyers, which significantly undermines the effectiveness of the procedure. I repeat, too many times, too often, the parties do not attend mediation session and are represented by their lawyers, which significantly undermines the effectiveness of the procedure. And the most debated topic among the Italian mediation practitioners lawyers since 2019 had been not how to improve the effectiveness of the procedure in general, but rather the power of autonomy granted by the party who does not appear to his lawyer attending the meeting. I just wrote this sentence, the basic of the discussion. Power attorney, yes. Power attorney, no. Power attorney, how? Power attorney, maybe. Completely obscuring the analysis of the essence of the procedures and its several issues. Many times, the lawyers showed up at the mediation meetings alone, showing a power attorney. The validity of the document, in accordance with the Civil Procedure Code, was but this kind of power attorney, according to the Civil Procedure Code, was limited to the trial. And mediation is an out-of-court procedure, so that the power attorney, according to the law, was not useful at all. But the consequences were just a look of incredulity, so not a pity. Then we started to see anonymous powers of attorney with a signature always authenticated by the lawyer, which is not according to the law, several times at least with an attached copy of identification document of the party, what signed the power of attorney. The current table has ruled on the topic specifying the delegation for participation in the meeting pursuant to paragraph 4 is conferred with a document signed with a non-authenticated signature and contains the details of the delegating power's identity document. In the case refers to Article 11, the delegating party may grant the delegation with a signature authenticated by the public official authorized to do so, not the lawyer. The person delegated to participate in the mediation meeting takes care of the presentation and delivery of the delegation conferred in accordance with this paragraph, together with an authenticated copy of her identity document for the acquisition in the procedural documents, and so on. Therefore, substantial special power of attorney is sufficient with the details of the delegating party's identity document. And I would add a copy of this document attached. The copy of the delegated identity document was already acquired as a matter of practice. Clarification also in relation to the duration of the procedure. Initially 6 months extendable, then 3 extendable, now 6 again. But these time limits are not particularly relevant. Please, the next slide. One innovation, which might seem lexical, but which instead affects the substance of the procedure, and some important consequence is the specification, the means to which the mediation agreement is attached. The means to which the mediation agreement is attached. As you know, at the end, just arriving at the end of the procedure, if the parties reach an agreement, they write it, sign it, and also their lawyers, but not the mediator, because it's a parties' agreement. The mediator should join only the mediation procedure minutes signed by the parties, the lawyers, and the mediator itself. I repeat, the minutes, according to the correttivo, the minutes to which the conciliation agreement is attached. These respect the essence of the mediation procedure. The agreement belongs to the parties, and the relevant document is signed only by them and by the lawyers, if any. What says them? The minute, according to the outcome of the procedure, agreement or no agreement, is signed by the parties, the lawyers, and the mediator. We're not responsible for the content of the agreement. But unfortunately, too many times the agreement is written inside the minute and is normal in online dispute resolution. But let's go on. It is not just theory. Legislative Decree 28/2010, just at the beginning, specifies the report containing a conciliation agreement is exempt from registration tax with the value limit of 100,000 euro. Otherwise, the tax is due for the part excess. The report containing the conciliation agreement is exempt from registration tax. Several times, the Revenue Agency, in the presence of agreements in mediation, especially those concerning adverse possession, without the minions, have contested the application of the tax reliefs. So, the agreement and the minutes must be all together and showed to the Revenue Agency. What has been the results of all these legislative measures? The number of mediation has continued to rise. Oh, just a moment, please. Allora, the number of mediation has continued to rise, albeit slowly, and a significant finding is that the settlement rate stood at 30.6% in cases where the party invited to mediation attended, and 53.1% if the parties decide to proceed beyond the first meeting. Therefore, the number of mediation procedure has increased not too much, but has increased the number of agreement. And very important, the attention by judges. Which are the requirements to be mediator? The mediation is regulated as an independent profession. Legislative Decree 2010, mediators must be of good reputation. And according to Ministerial Decree 150/2023, Cartabia Reform, aspiring mediators must have a degree in law. If they have a degree in another subject, or if they are registered with a professional association or college with a bachelor's degree, they must complete a legal education course, 14 hours legal education course. The mandatory initial course, the same for everyone, lasts not less than 80 hours, divided into theoretical modules, 40 hours in person or via audiovisual connection in synchronous mode, maximum 50 hours, and practical modules, 40 hours in person. The legally in-depth course lasts no less than 14 hours. For all, final assignment lasts no less than 4 hours in person. New rules likely on the way. The Italian Parliament is currently debating mandatory mediation to be extended to proceedings relating to all disposable civil rights. This is very important. To all disposable civil rights. In controversies concerning disposable rights pending in court at first instance for more than 3 years, and on the other fed back to the court for a decision, the judge shall, within 60 days of the entry into force of the decree, order that mediation proceedings be conducted. The weak point, two very important innovations, if they will be approved. But the weak point is still training. I repeat, mediation is a multidisciplinary science, essentially based on communication techniques. An 80-hour course is enough to inform, but not for professionals. Moreover, most trainers and trainees are lawyers. Therefore, lectures mainly focus on civil procedural rules as applied to mediation. Consequences: the mediation procedure should be informal slim. On the contrary, it's becoming increasingly proceduralized, the so-called the lawyerization of the mediation. And not only in Italy. An American writer, Mediation, the New Arbitration, an article already written in 2010. Anyway, in Italy, the laboratory is still at its beginning. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, dear Giovanni, for your presentation, for your clear presentation, and for sharing with us your knowledge.
I hope there are not too many sleepers. Okay. Many sleepy people. Okay.
Fine. It was very interesting. And the whole presentation, actually, it was an answer to many questions from my students and trainees. And those questions, I will not read it in details, but it was around the history of the mandatory mediation in Italy, for questions about the legal framework, question about the status of a mediator as an independent profession, and the importance of the institutions here, which are working for the training, the continuous training of mediators. So those questions.
Every 2 years, there must be a course of 18 hours duration for all mediators.
Okay, and all those questions were answered. Thank you very much. I will read these questions in Arabic for my students later. So, but thank you. It was a very interesting presentation.
I hope useful for your students.
Yes, but as usual, you're always generous in your in sharing your knowledge. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time, dear Giovanni.
Many thanks for the invitation, for the attention.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.